Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So today we'll be discussing about soul making into classical period. Let me share to you my screen. I hope you can still see this one, but so wait for a bit. I'll be connecting it to our Google Classroom. Actually, I posted this one already in our Google Classroom, and you can check this out in our Google Classroom. That's on topic 22 on our Google Classroom. So for a bit, people sharing my screen to you. Okay, that's it. So we are on this topic 22, soul making, soul sound structure. What is soul sound and structure in classical period? So just in addition to what we have discussed last time about soul making, it's an alternative venue for knowing ourselves and looking into the depths and real meaning of what we are doing for our everyday life. That is according to Narciso 2012. Um, just a recap on what we have discussed last time. You are going rather to give your insights about what is soul making on our previous video on YouTube channel. So continuation, it is an exploration and application of the imagination in active way. Because you are of when you are when you are imagining and when you are um wanted to apply something, so it is like it is a progression from what you are thinking. So that's why it's an active way to develop the artist in us, awakening the art in us that has been stagnant or undeveloped for numerous years. I had told last time or recorded video that we are all artists in our own way. It's just that the famous artists have the kind of mastery on their subject matter. Third one, and fourth one rather, it is a form of crafting stories, are transforming brief moments into images, are symbols, thus connecting with people, understanding culture, and embodying tolerance and peace. It's crafting stories because it's based on your imagination. So you're the one who crafted that one. That's why you are said to be the author, no, of that kind of craft from your idea, from your imagination, putting it down into a writing or a piece of music or a movie, or it can be a form of art. So we are down now to the classical. So what is classical soul, by the way? So your classical soul is a radio format focusing on the soul music from the 1950s to 1970s, occasionally venturing into 1980s. So we have genres for the classical soul. We have rhymes and blues, we have artists such as Pat Domino and Ray Charles. For the mood tone, artists such as The Temptations and The Supremes. 1960s, soul music, artists such as Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett. We also have funk and disco. These kinds of genres are really relevant in today's generation. We have funk, artists such as Cool and the Gang and Parliament Fundacadelic. Disco artists such as Earth, Wind and Fire and Donna Summer. In the 1970s, soul music artists such as Al Green and Barry White. So it started on 1950s depending on funk and disco, which are really widely spread until today. Yeah. So also have classical sound. Classical music is an art music produced or rooted in traditions of Western culture, including both liturgical, religious, and secular music, while a more precise term is also used to refer to the period from 1970s to 1820s, the classical period. So this article is about the broad span of time from before 6th century AD. AD means after death to the present day, which includes the classical period and the various other periods. So the central norm of this tradition became codified between 1650s to 1900s, so which is known as a common practice period, which when you say common practice period, that belongs to um, from 1650s to 1916 until this day, for on that day onward, the 1900s. So we have now this one. The major divisions as a Western art music are as follows. So we have ancient music period, early music period, Renaissance, And we also have this common practice period, which we talked about. So we have here in early music period, we have two things to remember. We have the medieval era and the Renaissance era. And for common practice period, we have the Baroque era, Galant music era, classical era, or romantic era. We all have been discussing this one on our class for NGIC 6. And I believe that all you have grasped already the important information about these eras. I believe so. So we also have the major division. This is a continuation. We also have late 19th century to 20th and 21st centuries, 1890 to present, which is today. And that includes modernist, impressionism, expressionism, and neoclassicism. And postmodern era or contemporary 1950s to present, we have experimental minimalism and post-minimalism, which is really widespread with the minimalism and post-minimalism, di ba? All in the architecture. What we can see right now, how our houses was built, how we use furnitures in our homes, no? We are into minimalism period. Under this early period, we have this medieval era, which has we discussed kanina. So this medieval era includes music from after the fall of Rome to about 1400. So monophonic chants, also called plain songs or Gregorian chant, was the dominant form until about 1100. So Catholic monks developed the first forms of modern European musical notations in order to standardize liturgy throughout the world church. So polyphonic modal voice music developed from monophonic chant throughout the late Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, including the more complex voicing of modes. So, dili lang na siya na-develop karon lang na naman ano kind of music. It was what we have today, what music that we hear today is the product of what is before during those times, this is early years. So we also have in this Renaissance era. Renaissance era was from 1400s to 1600s. It was characterized by greater use of instrumentation. So we have here multiple interweaving melodic lines and the use of the first bass instrument. Ayun, ng mga string instrument na siya. And on the succeeding era, we have the common practice period. We have Baroque. So Baroque music is characterized by the use of complex tonal counterpoints and the use of a continuous bass line. So music became more complex in comparison with the simple songs of all previous periods. With the all previous periods, take note. So the beginning of the sonata from form took shape in a canzona as did a more formalized notions of theme and variation. So the tonalities of major and minors are means for managing dissonance and chromaticism in music to full shape. So it's more on the bass line. If you're familiar with the bass line. During the Baroque era, keyboard music played on harps, harpsichord and pipe organ became increasingly popular. So we have now the violin family of stringed instruments. So we have violin, guitars, the different ways on how to use it. And opera has stacked musical drama begin to differentiate itself from earlier music and dramatic forms. So you can easily see this kind of music in search out online. I let you listen to classical musics on online, no, and you can see it. And still, we are using that one during the booths, no, or with proms. It was long before made, no, and one of the artists is, if I'm not mistaken, is Ludwig Beethoven. The music of Ludwig Beethoven are really good. It's really exquisite. As you can check it out on YouTube. And also how it is classical era. No? So from all those periods that we discussed, we are now down to classical eras. So the term classical music includes all Western art music from the medieval era to 2000. So the classical era was the period of Western art music from the 1750s to the early 1820s in the era of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Joseph Haydn, and Ludwig van Beethoven. So that's why I talk about Ludwig Beethoven all the time because it's the not only Ludwig, but in my case, I really love Ludwig Beethoven. So the classic era established many of the norm of composition, presentations, and style. It was also when the piano became the predominant keyboard instrument, so the basic forces required for an orchestra because somewhat standardized. Also, they grow as the potential for a wider array of instruments and was developed in the following centuries. So the chamber music grew to include ensembles with as many as the 8 to 10 performers for singers. So opera continues to develop with regional styles in Italy, France, and German speaking. As you can see in our in the background, we have a lot of people here, so just bear with it. So the opera buffa formed comic operas in popular. The symphonies came into its own musical form, and the concerto was developed as a vehicle for display of virtuoso playing skills. Orchestra no longer required as harpsichord, which had been part of the traditional continuo in the Baroque style, and were often led by the lead violinist, now called the concert master. O, para makita niyo dira sa tunga, no? Concert master. The major composer of this period include Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Ludwig van Beethoven, Joseph Haydn, Christoph Gluck, Christian Bach, Luigi Boccari, and we have also Dak, Clemente, Sorir, and so on and so forth. And when I say structure, when I say classical structure, it's a style of building that we're done actually with sound into the music, and now we're on the structure for soul making and classical period. So classical architecture is a style of building that originated in an ancient Greece and Rome. So for centuries, architects have drawn influence from these civilizations and incorporated traditional ideas into subsequent styles of architecture. So in a broad sense, classical architecture can be encompass all architecture that is derived from the ancient Greeks and Romans. So for our purposes, the classical revival movement is the most true to form style of classical architecture that ever existed or that existed today. Just history, a quick history of the classical structure. Classical structure or architecture rather was constructed in the 5th century BC before Christ in Greece and around the 3rd century AD in Rome or after that in Rome. So the style was evolved many times over and over the years. And during the Italian Renaissance, architects worked to restore classical Roman architecture. So not to say today was just a what call this one a restoration of what was um, built long time ago. So, and centuries later in Europe, excavation in Pompeii reignited the architecture of ancient Greece, the corresponding architectural style that became known as the Greek Revival. So, this architecture focused heavily on the Greek ideal of proportion and structural integrity. And this one. So classical architecture prized concepts like boldness, humility, and intellect. I don't know if you haven't seen kind of architectural with this classical architecture, but when you see something like this, even in pictures, you can really see that it has concept of boldness, of humility, and intellect. No, it doesn't just showcase just nothing, no. It dili na siya para lang para inom lang ana, but there is something, no. These values help define individual components that can be found in several classical architectural styles. So some of these key elements include the following. Number one is symmetry and proportion. Now we all know about elements of design. So classical buildings are usually symmetrical and have elements like columns and windows that are evenly spaced out evenly. So we can really see perfection on the architecture design. So columns is specific style or order. This classical order can be Doric, Ionic, or Corinthian for Greek architecture. The Romans also had Tuscan and composite orders. Front porch topped with pediment. Many homes and buildings feature a full height front porch that is set with a classical pediment at the top. The door is usually positioned at the center of the house. During building materials, classical architecture incorporates materials like marble, concrete, and brick. So classical design motifs homes often have dental molding, medium pitch roofs, box eaves, decorative doors, surrounds, and broken pediments over the entry doors. A rectangular windows were often double hanged and included a variety of symmetrical window configuration. Here, so we have here now pictures. So this on the left side, we have caryatids on our Erechtheion or from Athens, an example of Greek architectural element taken up at the later classical architecture. You see, we have symmetry and proportion as they make that kind of work. In the front, here in the right side of the front of ancient Roman temples, like the Mason Carré in Nimes, have inspired much later classical architecture, example, Virginia State Capitol. Looking at the columns of this masterpiece. See it? Now, what is your reaction for this classical period into soul making, which in accordance with the soul, sound, and structure? Comment down below on our YouTube in the comment section, please. Thank you. That ends our discussion. Thank you for listening.